So I'm going to start off by asking, who has been the biggest influence on your life? And what lessons did that person teach you?
And I guess it probably would have been my mother, because she was raised in Texas in the 30s during the Depression, and she was married very young, and she had my brother when she was 16 and when I was 18. She had me when she was 18. And so she was very young, and when I was 6, her 2 sisters and a brother who were older than we were, like one was 3 years older, one was 6 years older. So, they were older. But she and my dad, their mother was dying of cancer. And so different brothers, they were one of 8. Mother was one of 8, and my dad was one of 8 children. And so she had 6 sisters and 2 brothers, and my dad had 2 brothers and 6 sisters. So we had a lot of aunts and uncles. But anyway, when Mama died, she was just in her 40s. She had eye cancer. And nobody wanted to take all of the kids, but, split them up. And my mother says, we're not going to split these kids up. So she and my dad, who were 20s, early 20s, took these 3 kids and raised them. So they're like my brothers and sisters. And I think about Mother, as young as she was into cleanliness, honesty, all of the good things. We went to the Church of Christ. We all belonged to the Church of Christ, which was a good church. It was a big church in Texas. And we had some of the better times as kids because we didn't have TV, and I was the youngest, so my brother said to me the other day, I was talking to Jean the other day, and she said, we don't remember you much when you were little. So it means that they didn't pay attention to me, but I was always tagging along. I knew what they were doing. And so we only had one bike between the 3 of us. It was a boy's bike. And the only way I could get on it was to climb up on the porch and get on it. And then the only way to get off was just to fall off, which I did a lot. And I went back to that house to see that house, and the porch is about this tall. But to me, it was a big, tall porch. We played hopscotch. We played Devils in the Dark. All these little games we made up. And we played a lot of softball. And then so she was very into honesty and cleanliness. I mean, she was really into that. Well, when she went out and picked up these kids, they were living not in a very good place, and she said, I'm going to clean you guys up and you'll be as good as anybody, she said to those kids. And the older one ended up being class favorite, football queen, blah, blah, blah. So she blossomed with all of that. And we lived mostly, I think, in Muleshoe. We lived in Muleshoe, Texas. I was born in Sweetwater and lived there in the 1st and 2nd grade. Some reason in Texas they skipped grades or something, and which would mean when I went to Muleshoe I was supposed to be in the 4th grade, and Mother thought that was too much of a one for me, so she made me stay in 3rd. I remember that. And we had all the softball games. We played out in front in the street, and we walked to school. And then in Texas, during that time when I would have been in the 1st and 2nd grade. No, I guess I would be in the 5th grade. They would turn school out for 2 weeks to go pick cotton for the farmers. And if you didn't go help pick cotton, you weren't very well thought of, because they'd come around, and I just loved it, because, it was a big deal. They'd come around in the morning early with these big flatbed trucks and pick us all up. And Mother'd have all our lunches packed in our boxes and everything. And they'd take us to whatever field we were going to work in that day. So for 2 weeks we'd pick. It's really pulled cotton. We didn't pick it. We pulled bolies, we call it. And I remember my very first day, I picked 100 pounds, and I got $1. And so the next few days, Jim said, my brother, who's 2 years older, says, boy, Mother's going to really be upset at me because what he'd do, he'd pull enough to lay down on his sack and rest and sleep. And so I remember giving him some so he could say he picked more than he did. And so those were good years, I guess, because we all took piano lessons, and we all sang at church because our church didn't have a piano, so it was all voices. And I took expression from the woman next door and babysat her little boy. We exchanged that. And so I was there until I was about 13. So, but, Mother did all of that and instilled in all of us. She was honest, and she was clean, and she just made everybody, you can be what you want to be. She didn't have much. She worked hard growing up, picking cotton, and they owned a secondhand store, so it was a tough life back then. So anyway, I think about her more too, taking all the kids and raising them and stuff. So she probably was the most influential, I guess. And of course, my dad was my everything. I was just partial. We were just like this. But he died when he was 47, I guess. And then she took and raised a grandchild, my brother's son. So she always was raising hers and brothers and stuff. So she was kind of, the whole family just looked at her for that. So she was special. But she was 84 when she died. And I would say she had the biggest influence on me because I had a good life. I was the youngest, so I didn't, all of that stuff that was going on, I was kind of beyond. I mean, I remember the day the Japs bombed Pearl Harbor. See, I must have been about 7. And I remember everybody walking around crying, and of course they worshipped Roosevelt, and everybody going down and signing up. Men were signing up to go, and I remember my dad went down, and they turned him down because his family owned Wade's packing plant in Sweetwater, and so the guys all had jobs, but he had been lifting a big meat off of a hanger, and it hooked his arm. And so his arm he could never straighten his arm past this part. And so they wouldn't accept him in the military because he had a stiff arm. But, and then shortly after that, we moved to Roswell and then into Muleshoe, Texas. And they seem to have had, even though I think about we had a good life and everything, during the war, we could only have 2 pairs of shoes a year. And everything was rationed. So we would go into Clovis, New Mexico, because that was a big city, and buy our shoes. And we had stamps that you used, and we always had a big, big garden. And then I remember down the, used to be our cafeteria at school, they turned that into a canning place where people could bring fruit and meat and whatever, so that they had a place to can their food, so we'd have food. So we always had a big pantry full of food and stuff. We had our own garden. And I guess, when you think about when you're little and those things are going on, because those were probably some of the best years of my life, I remember. We just, had a good time. Played games and little town, and then we moved from there to Muleshoe, we went to Roswell, and that, of course, was when I was getting it. I was a freshman, I guess. And the junior high was separate from the high school, and I was a majorette, involved in. They had some sororities in school and stuff, and you got involved in that. But those were then they moved to Albuquerque during my junior year, and it just destroyed me. I mean, it's like just when I was getting acquainted with everybody, and then we go to Albuquerque, and this is a brand new school that year, and everybody came from another school, and I just remember Mother said she thought at one time of sending me back to Roswell because I was so miserable. And what I did is I just decided. And I was a majorette, and I didn't care for. It was different than when it was in Roswell, and so I dropped that, and I just decided just finish it out, and so I didn't get to it. And I was involved in a few things, but by my senior year, I would work. I would go to school in the morning, and in the afternoon I would go down to J.C. Penney and work in their little candy. So I really didn't do too much in high school. And then I worked, and then I went down to Eastern New Mexico University in Portales. And that's where I decided I'd be a court reporter. So I took machine shorthand. I was going to be a court reporter. I always wanted to do something exciting, like in the movies. When we were in Muleshoe, they only had a movie on Saturday. So we always went to the movies on Saturday, and they had I lived where it was definitely segregated. Across tracks was Blacktown, and when they came they didn't come to our cafes and stuff, but they'd go up the side stairs and sit upstairs to the balcony for the movies. And that's another thing what I remember too is. My dad wouldn't have hurt. He had a lot of friends that were black. I mean, they were black, they were different, but he did lots of stuff with them, and he wouldn't have hurt one of them for anything. Because I remember when we left there, one of the guys asked if he couldn't just come with him. He didn't ask him to pay for him or anything. He just wanted to go wherever he was going, but we couldn't do that. But I think about those days now with all the segregation, because they lived in shanties, just little dumpy towns and stuff. It was, and see, we had, my first cigarette was from a black woman that came and did our ironing for us. They would come and iron. And she gave me a puff of her cigarette. I never told my mother or anything. And see, we didn't have washers and dryers and stuff. So the big thing for me was I would go with Mother to the wash house. And they had the 4 tubs of water. And so that was a big day. The washing would take hours. And my big thing was a Coca-Cola with peanuts in it. So I would I enjoyed it because I'd sit there and drink Coca-Colas with peanuts in them. And then we'd hang all the clothes out at home. And when you bring them in, you have to sprinkle them all because they were to be ironed. And so we did have a woman that when we got to Muleshoe, we had a woman come in and iron because it was just too much. And she's the one that had me puff that cigarette. I never told anybody. And but those were good years. And then after I got down to Eastern New Mexico, I have still good friends from there. And I was taking machine shorthand, and it wasn't really what I wanted. I thought, what am I doing down here? It's costing money being here and all this stuff, and I don't really know whether I want to do this or not. So I ended up back in Albuquerque. And got a job. Of course, I always wanted to travel. That was my best friend, Carolyn. We're still in touch in Roswell. And see, we were in Roswell when the UFO or whatever it was crashed. And that was, my dad worked at the base, but he never talked about it. They were told never to talk about it, and he never talked about it. That's the officer, the military officer out there lived right next to my aunt. And he only said to her, is if you knew what was underneath those mountains out there, you would be scared to death. But he wouldn't say anything past that. So we just went on and ignored it, And then I was about 100 miles when they dropped the first atomic bomb. We used to go down to, when my mother had a lot of arthritis, and we'd go to the hot tubs. And we were at this one place about 100 miles when that bomb went off. And I remember it was hot, and we had sat at the door. But when it happened, everyone thought the world was coming to the end. That was what I remember my mother saying so much.
Just check, which bomb was this? Was this when they dropped the
atomic bomb?
Okay, so was this the one at Trinity? So the first one that ever went off? Okay.
Yeah. And so it seems like we were around a lot of things that are going on, and so it was just, I haven't done. And then when I got, I decided I came back and I was a secretary out at the Sandia Corporation, which was an atomic energy thing, and I worked there. And then I decided to go. I was dating someone, and we were going to get married when he got his degree, and he had to go in. So I thought, well, maybe I'll just get with one of the airlines and fly if I can. And so I went with TWA and went over to California, all excited to go to California. And I went over in a DC-3, and I was so disappointed because I wanted a big, like the Martin. And they had quite a drilling interview over there. I remember they even had me stand up on the chair so they could see my legs because we wore these long dresses. And so we did that. They did lots of things, a lot of tests. So anyway, I was by the time I got through, I thought, well, I don't care. This is too much for me. I didn't like it. So I went home. And they didn't take me for that class, but they asked if I would stay for another class. And so they did call me in for an interview. For this interview, I went to St. Louis. And they wanted me to let my hair grow because you couldn't have your hair touch your collar. And you couldn't wear, we had to wear girdles, nothing to jiggle. It was really very, very strict. And so I went through that, and they called me and asked me to come to the class. That was in December, I guess. So I took the class up in Kansas City, and that was kind of a big thing. It was, I started in December, and the weather was bad, so, we had cancellations, so we'd have to take our suitcases with us and a blouse slip because lots of times we couldn't even go home. So anyway, those were those years, and then I got married, and we lived. Well, first of all, he went back to Cornell, finished school. Then he finished his military, and then we went to. He joined GE, and they put him on a year's training. So our first trip was New York City. And I've told you about my first trip to New York City after I started flying out of Chicago. We went down to Chicago. And we were, the pilots knew I had never been there, and it was nighttime. So they had me come stand behind them as we landed in New York City. So, I've been hooked on New York City ever since. So anyway, I saw lots of, San Francisco and Chicago and all around. And then I guess the biggest thing for me is being with Leroy. We've been married 30 years. And I would have to say that generally that's been my best ever years. Because we really have seen the world. We've been around the world. We've been to a lot of places. And, we have good kids, good grandkids. And so I just think it's 30 years, and that's a long time. But as far as stress and all the things that people go through and everything, this has been it for me, really. Because it just, I can't imagine, because we do what we want to, we go where we want to, nobody's griping at anybody else. It's a wonderful way to live. So he's really my special person. And we just getting older, and now I decided I'd give up tennis. We played golf, we played tennis, we bowled, we've done all those things. We have lots of good friends that we go out to lunch with. We have an RV and we go with them. And but we do all of this stuff, and then when we come in, one of the first things we always feel like is, isn't it good just to be home? So we have to actually watch that because we're contented. And then to live in Arizona is kind of a plus.
It is.
And I guess there's not really been anything. I've met some famous people, and I've done some things, but none of them really. I mean, they were fun, but it's fun to see the kids. I don't know. Actually, and for me, Ryan, this is a very good time because the kids are fine. The grandkids are doing fine. Leroy and I are doing great. And it's like, you almost feel guilty to have it so good when there's so many things going on, But it's when you get to this age, you don't realize that, you don't have to be doing stuff all the time. I've done everything I wanted to do. And just think about, there's not anything else I really want to do. And that amazes me to say that, because there are things I would do that would be fun. But, used to it was like, go to Europe, like Singapore, go to here, and we've done all that. And so now it's a matter of just doing what we want to do. So spend more time with you guys, for one thing.
You need to work on that.
Yeah. So I can't think of anything like during the war. I was kind of younger, but I know I can't think of anything that was special. It's just that we just did what we had to do. And then my brother ended up being a boxer, and of all the sports, that's the one thing I disliked the most. But, we used to have to sit with the radio and listen to Lou box. And when he became the lightweight champion of the world, that was a poor boy coming into all this money, and he didn't have a very good life. So, but anyway, here we are.
I do have a couple of questions based on stuff that you were talking about. So you mentioned that you were in Roswell when the crash happened, and you were in New Mexico when the atomic bomb happened. Can you elaborate on either of those any more than you already did? You said that they never really said anything about what happened with Roswell.
They didn't, but right away they came out that he had parts of, this one guy had gone out there, he had parts of a UFO. And it was hushed up right away. And, of course, people weren't allowed to go out there. And the thing that always surprises me a little bit is that my dad was he went out he had one day off, and he'd take his gun and his cigarette, and he'd go out and hunt and stuff. And he loved being outdoors, and he never talked about it. And I've always wondered, and I was too not into it but no big deal for me. What was that, 12 or something? And and I've often wondered what he knew. Because I feel like there was something there that they never did really tell us what it was. And it may not have been anything important. But that area in New Mexico is so liable to have a lot of that kind of stuff. They find more and more things there. And I guess the one thing that I think about now is that Leroy kids me all the time about, I said, with this new plane crash, I said, it's like UFOs have just taken them down there or whatever, we laugh. Because I watched a lot of the science and the History Channel. But, I just feel like when I was growing up, the world was right here, and the sun was here, and the moon was here. And now, there are all kinds of satellites, and there's other, I think that the next probably 100 years, it's going to be a totally different. I mean, who'd ever dream that people would go to the moon? We never, ever would dream that. And they did cover up, and it's just like them dropping the atomic bomb, testing it. And I had an opportunity to go up for one of those tests because I worked at Sandia Corporation, which was in the atomic energy. Yeah, and so we were allowed, if we wanted to go, they were going to have some, and if we wanted to go see it. And I don't know, I think I changed my mind. I didn't want to go. But now it's just, they're discovering so many things. And and your guys with electronics and all of this stuff, when you think about, the biggest thing we had was a radio. And our telephones were all, we were all on party lines. You didn't have your own, your own party lines. And so there were just a lot of things, and our whole living was different. The way we lived and the way, because we didn't have all of the stuff that they have now. It was all very simple. And I think now it gets complicated more. There are more decisions to make and more things to decide whether you agree with or not agree with. So I think you guys are in for a challenge.
That's quite possible.
Yeah.
You mentioned you flew into St. Louis. You were back in the 50s. What was it like then?
50s.
50s. Well, when was it?
1956.
1956. So what was it like then?
Well, when we were in St. Louis, we never really got to go anyplace because we stayed in a hotel close to the airport, and we were there every day, and then bused so we didn't really. And when we were on a flight, we didn't get a lot of time to visit anything. Although one other thing that I did was, after we were married, I got a call from them to see if I wanted, I call it a spy in the sky, because they were going to the ex-hostesses and seeing which ones wanted to do a 6-month assignment of checking the hostesses on the plane. And I think, when we used to go, and so I did that. I did that for 6 months, and I flew into New York every month and did a helicopter into where we stayed. And Carl Icahn, that owned TWA, he would always be there when we got there. And so that was, I saw more from doing that because I traveled. We had to go incognito. So that's when I really saw the cities. If I wanted to see them, they would, we'd decide which planes we were going to take and where we were going to go, and they'd tell us. And then we'd go out and just be spies, like we had to be careful so they didn't know who we were. They said, don't go into the airport and walk around like you're used to doing, like you own it. Like I can spot one a mile away, a hostess, and so we had to go to Europe once a month, and that's a long flight, but we had a chance to see some things. And then I just flew into New York and Chicago. Lived in Chicago, of course, and so that was interesting. You'd have to make up stories, but 6 months was a long time, so I was kind of. And then they called one other time and asked me to come. This job was checking the planes before they went off, if they were clean and had everything in there they're supposed to. And we do it in couples. And so I remember once we went out to this one gal, and we went out to look at the plane, and I said, "There's no towels in here." We were looking around, and I'm saying, "This doesn't look ready." So anyway, we go back in, and so we say to him, "That plane doesn't look ready. It's whatever." So he gets out his notebook and looks at the number, and he says, they had the wrong plane out there. So everybody jumped up and started running. They had to go move that plane and bring another plane. So I had some interesting experience. I really have.
Very fun.
Yeah.
What is your earliest memory?
Well, let's see. I thought of that before. I think I remember when I must have been, I wasn't in school, so I must have been around 4. And we shared a house with someone. We had the back apartment. And I don't remember too much about it, but my brother had a goat, a pet goat that they had in the back. Billy is what his name was. And I remember the goat and living there because I remember the Christmas we spent there. But one day I went out to the backyard and he attacked me, this goat. So anyway, it wasn't really bad. He may have been playing with me. Who knows what I was doing. But anyway, Mother and Daddy took him to the plant and they butchered him. And we never told, his mother says, he must run away or something. We never told my brother about this until he grew up years later. So I don't remember, I remember living in that house, and I think that's probably I remember things like I had impetigo or something, that was little sores, and you had to take this god-awful medicine, big medicine. And so I would go in to the bathroom, and Mother would give me the pill, and I'd take it. And then she'd leave, and I'd put it in her bonnet that she used for hanging clothes, those big bonnets. And I never told her. And then one day, she decided to use that. And she put it on, and all these pills fell out. She was just like beside herself. So, we had some fun. I was a mess, I guess, sometimes. But I took dancing, and I took piano, and I remember first grade, I had the lead in the play, and I got to sing a song, and they'd had this costume, this fancy foo-foo in the back, and they said, don't forget when you walk away to turn around so they can see the back. Of course I did. Forget. So I had some fun things.
So you mentioned you had siblings.
Mm-hmm.
Who were they?
Well, my brother Jim, and he was 2 years older than I was. And he was definitely my mother's favorite because she wasn't very happy about me coming along back in those days. And so I became my dad's very favorite. And he ended up, he went to college too, but he had, in high school when we were in Roswell, that's where he graduated. Tommy Brookshire and was in our high school. He was a football player, big football player. I can't remember who he was with now. That was one of his friends. And so they all enlisted in the Marines. He went into the Marines, my brother, and served on the aircraft carrier. And then he became the light heavyweight champion of boxing on the aircraft carrier. So anyway, when he came back, he got married and had a little boy, and he's the one that my mother raised. And then the others were my two aunts and uncle that came to live with us. And both of them married, and she still lives, Bill lives in Lubbock, and I go see her. She's 86. Still makes her bed, walks every day, she's all there. And then my uncle, who he was quite a bit older, and when he came to live with us, he was there just a short time, and then he went to New York City to live with Lou when he was boxing, because he did. And then they're all still living, and we all don't think of us as aunts and uncles. It's really like siblings because we were close. And let's see, and my brother got into the police work from Marines, became a police chief here in Arizona, and then he's now 82. He lives in Tucson. So, we're kind of scattered because there's a lot of us actually, cousins and stuff. And so that's about all, I think, family. We have lots of family that have done lots of things, but you can imagine with my mother from 8 and my dad from 8, I have lots of uncles and cousins and stuff everywhere doing everything. So nobody really famous, I guess.